Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing Stalingrad by Antony Beevor and why you should read it if you haven't already. I recently covered D-Day by Antony Beevor, and today we're going to discuss Stalingrad, the largest battle in human history and perhaps the greatest battle in human history. I think it had more on the line than maybe any other battle throughout all of human history. It's hard to say that for certain because you have stuff like the Siege of Constantinople and whatnot that had a huge impact on history, but certainly a lot was on the line during Stalingrad. This was kind of the turning point of World War II. And I've studied this battle more than I have any other battle in human history for quite a few reasons. One, it's interesting to me that this is the two bad guys of the 20th century battling it out, and it's the largest scale battle ever. That's kind of interesting to me. You know, there's not like the good guys, the Americans fighting the Nazis. It's the Soviets who are evil throughout the 20th century and the Nazis who are also extremely evil, and they're both battling it out. So that's interesting to me. Also, the fact that it's taking place in the absolute cold. It's taking place in minus 30 weather, which I have some experience with being from Edmonton, Canada. I know what it's like to be in minus 30 weather. So just reading about it, I can kind of tap into that a little bit more. So many things that I'll get into later in the video, but as always, I will go through a synopsis of what the book itself actually covers. I'll give you guys a few films and a few documentaries that I would watch alongside your reading of Stalingrad, and then I'll give you guys a few recommended books that I would branch off to after reading Stalingrad if you're interested in learning more about this battle, because I know myself, I've read quite a few books on Stalingrad to this point because it's just so fascinating to me. So before we get into all of that, I want to give you guys a couple words on the historian himself. Antony Beevor's journey to becoming one of the world's foremost chroniclers of war is as compelling as the battles he so vividly recounts. Born into a literary family in London in 1946, Beevor's early years were shaped by classical education at Winchester College and military discipline at Sandhurst, where he was a student of John Keegan, himself a titan of military history. Although Beevor briefly served in the British Army, it was in writing that he found his battlefield, turning to history with the disciplined eye of a soldier and the sensitivity of a novelist. His works stand out for their human focus. He brings war down from the level of grand strategy to the mud, terror, and tragedy lived by ordinary people. Stalingrad was his breakthrough, cementing his reputation through its blend of exhaustive research, narrative drive, and moral gravity. Beevor's continued success with works like Berlin and D-Day only reaffirm his role as a bridge between scholarly rigor and public history, writing books that both academics and general readers find indispensable. So yeah, hopefully that gives you guys a better sense of who Antony Beevor is and why he's so important. He's one of the greatest living historians, and if I got the opportunity to interview him, that would be one of the greatest moments of my life. He is getting up there in age. I hope I get a chance to do that. Hopefully I get big enough quick enough. But yeah, I would love to interview a guy like that because he's so important. Like I said, his books are indispensable. I have so many of his books on my shelves. I just covered D-Day. I'll probably cover his book on Russia at some point in the near future. We're covering Stalingrad right now, and I'll throw up on screen right now kind of a list of his complete works if you guys want to dive deeper into his writings. I've read most of what he's written, not everything. There's still a couple books I have to pick up, but needless to say, I think everything from Antony Beevor is worth reading. Next up, I'm going to give you guys just a brief synopsis of what's actually covered in this book. Stalingrad, The Fateful Siege, 1942 to 1943, is Antony Beevor's masterwork, one of history's most harrowing battles, a clash that became the axis upon which the fate of World War II turned. Far from the sterile movements of armies on a map, Beevor's account plunges readers into the inferno of urban combat, starvation, and moral collapse, as Hitler's Sixth Army is drawn deeper into the icy ruins of the Volga city. With unparalleled access to Soviet and German archives, Beevor exposes the chaos behind both Nazi hubris and Stalinist brutality, illuminating the psychological unraveling of commanders and privates alike. The book captures the full scope of human suffering, from frostbitten Wehrmacht soldiers encircled without hope to Red Army conscripts hurled into battle without rifles, to civilians enduring hunger, bombardment, and terror. Yet within the grim landscape, Beevor finds moments of resilience, humanity, and bitter irony. This is not simply a military history, it is a monument of the extremes of endurance, cruelty, and survival that defined one of humanity's darkest chapters. So yeah, I hope that gives you guys a better sense of what's actually covered in this book and why it's such a emotional ride of a read. Antony Beevor, like no other historian, really drags you through the gravel while you're reading his books. You feel like you're there in the combat, and it's absolutely fantastic. So next, I want to give you guys some documentaries. Now, I don't have an exhaustive list for this. One day I'll make you guys a full video of my top 50 or 100 favorite World War II documentaries. I've seen so many in my life, but there are thousands out there, and I'm sure there's going to be many that I'll miss. So I'm going to throw up a couple up on screen right now that I've been able to find on YouTube, so they're easy to access for you guys. So if you guys want to go check out any of these documentaries you see on screen right now, I highly recommend all of them, and they'll give you kind of a visual guide to your understanding of Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad, and its history. I think it's always important to find visuals, especially for battles that we have visuals for. There is film footage of the Battle of Stalingrad. There are tons and tons of photos. So I would go online and go and look for those. Don't just go to Google Images. That's not actually the best way to do it. You'll get some great images on Google Images, but try to go find a website that archives photos from Stalingrad, and you'll find a much more exhaustive list there. There are hundreds, there are thousands of photos of this battle, and I highly recommend going and checking those out as you read this book. It can just kind of give you guys a visual representation of what was going on. Next, I want to recommend for you guys 3 films, one of which has nothing to do with Stalingrad, but I want to mention it today because it has to do with the German invasion of Russia. It's probably the strongest anti-war film I've ever seen in my life. It's a borderline horror film. It is not for the faint of heart. If you have a hard time watching films like Saving Private Ryan or anything with any sort of gore or horrific scenes, 1985's Come and See is probably going to be too intense for you. But if you're into intense movies, if you like to see the horror of war a little bit, if you want to feel what it was like a little bit, Come and See is the most powerful anti-war film I think I've ever seen in my life, maybe second to The Human Condition. The Human Condition, though, is a 9-hour 1960s black and white Japanese film. I know it's not for everyone, but I truly consider that to be the best World War II film of all time. Second to that, it might be Come and See. I can't remember in which order I placed films on my top 50 World War II films of all time video. You guys can go check that out if you guys want more recommendations. But Come and See is high up there for me, and it's powerful, extremely powerful. You're following this little boy who's in the Red Army, and he's fighting against the Germans as the Germans invade, and they do all sorts of cruel and horrible things to the people in the villages throughout. I think the movie takes place in Ukraine, but I'm not 100% certain on that. But Come and See from 1985 it's horrendous. It's not a fun watch. Trust me, you will be broken by this film, but I think everybody should watch it, especially if you're serious about studying World War II. I think that film is absolutely indispensable. So you can find it on YouTube, actually. I think you could find another film that I'm going to mention today on YouTube as well. I think they're both posted from the same film site, and I highly, highly recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel, especially if you like World War II films, if you like Russian films. Moss Film is a YouTube channel that you want to subscribe to because they post in HD full Russian films for free. You don't have to pay anything. There's no ads. And they post them with the English subtitles, sometimes with Spanish subtitles, sometimes even with French subtitles, so you can watch it in different languages. And these films are fantastic. Russian cinema has a very dear place in my heart. Some of my favorite films are Russian films. Andrei Tarkovsky is probably one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. He's like way high up there in my top 5. And it's such an indispensable resource. I really think every single person watching this video should go subscribe to Moss Films, watch films like The Ascent, watch films like Come and See. And I believe also Stalingrad is on there from 1993, which is probably the best film I've ever seen depicting the battles of Stalingrad. The acting in this film is phenomenal. It has some incredibly heartbreaking scenes. And the scale is tremendous. They were shooting in the snow. They were shooting in the conditions that kind of replicate what the people were fighting in Stalingrad were in. Everything's so accurate in that film, and I think Stalingrad from 1993 is truly the best film I've ever seen depicting that battle. But the second best is a little bit more popular. More people have seen this film. It came out in 2001, and it's, of course, Enemy at the Gates. And this kind of depicts more so the sniper battles that took place throughout the city. There's some fantastic acting throughout it. There's even a love story that's intertwined within it. And it is a really good film. I'm not here to shit on Enemy at the Gates. I think it's a fantastic film. I just think that Stalingrad from 1993 is a little bit superior in my opinion. And I feel like a lot less people have seen it. So go out there and watch 1993 Stalingrad. I know it's on YouTube. I just don't know if it's under the Moss Film banner or if somebody else posted it. But you guys can go find that film on YouTube. And like I said, it's between that and Enemy at the Gates. Those are really the two best films that depict the Battle of Stalingrad. So moving on from that, I want to give you guys a few recommended books now. So the first two books that I'll mention are a little bit more accessible. The third book that I'll mention is for those of you who really want to rigorously study the Battle of Stalingrad and you want the dry day-by-day accounts of every little troop movement. I'll get to that one in a second, but the first two books I want to mention is first, John Erickson's The Road to Stalingrad, kind of giving you guys a prelude of that battle. If you want to see how things led up to that, I would highly recommend The Road to Stalingrad. Chris Bellamy's Absolute War is also fantastic if you want to see a little bit more of the Russian perspective. Absolute War is a fantastic book as well, but I think the greatest work ever written on Stalingrad isn't even Antony Beevor's book. This is the most accessible book if you want to read about Stalingrad. If you're only ever going to read one book on Stalingrad, make it this one. This is the best overall book. But really, if you want the most exhaustive history, you have to pick up David Glantz's The Stalingrad Trilogy. I believe it's 4 books because I believe one of the volumes is split into 2 books, but it is long. It's detailed. It's incredibly dry. It's not narratively driven like this one. You don't feel like you're in the action. You don't get those visceral, emotional moments. None of that happens in David Glantz's series. David Glantz is trying to give you a day-by-day depiction of where everybody was, what exactly happened. It's a full, detailed recount of those 5-6 months of battle. So if you want the exhaustive history, you can read Glantz's work. There's also an abridged version, I believe on Audible for no credits. If you're subscribed to Audible, you don't have to use a credit to get this, but you can access David Glantz's abridged version of Stalingrad. So that might be a way to do it if you guys want to get a sense of Glantz's writing, but you don't want to read 4 books in a row or 3 volumes of Stalingrad. It is a lot. I will admit it's not for everybody. It's just for those who really, really want the rigorous study of seeing where the troops were at every moment of the battle. So yeah, I thought I'd recommend that one as well. And lastly, to conclude the video, normally I give you guys a selection of a few of my favorite quotes from the book, but since this is a nonfiction history book today, I think it's more suiting to give you guys some of my favorite facts. Now, not my favorite in that I enjoy that these facts exist, but my favorite in that they kind of help me to realize the scope and the magnitude of this battle. So hopefully these facts get you guys a little bit riled up to go pick this book up and read it. So the first few facts that I want to give you guys is just presenting the scale of the battle. So the Battle of Stalingrad lasted a little over 5 months. It took place from August 23rd, 1942 to February 2nd, 1943. It is considered the largest and bloodiest battle in human history because the casualty estimates range from 2 to 2.5 million killed, wounded, or captured. And this stretched across a front that was only 50 kilometers long. So this city is smaller than my home city of Edmonton. The population of Edmonton right now is, I believe, under 2 million. It's like 1.8 million or something like that. So I try to imagine in my head every single person in Edmonton dying in a period that's less than 6 months. I can't even fathom that in my head. Every time I travel to Edmonton, I see all of these people. I go to Rogers Stadium to watch my Edmonton Oilers. I see all of these people, thousands and thousands of people, and I try to imagine 2 million people perishing in a small little city in less than 6 months. It's very, very hard for me to wrap my head around that, but sometimes just knowing those numbers can get me close to that. The battle involved over 2,000 tanks, over 2,500 aircraft, and over 20,000 artillery pieces. The Soviets deployed over 1 million troops at their peak, and the German Sixth Army alone fielded 300,000 men at its start. Now, when the Battle of Stalingrad broke out, there was about 400,000 civilians living in the city. By the end of the battle, there was less than 10,000. On the opening day, when the Luftwaffe launched its initial raids on the city, it is estimated that around 40,000 civilians died in a single day of bombing. Now, I don't like to compare conflicts because it's muddy, it's difficult, different eras, different time periods, different technologies. World War II was an all-out war that consumed the entire planet. So it's hard to compare it to anything that's happening today. However, there's a very polarizing war that's going on today in the Gaza Strip. And a lot of people on the Palestinian side are clamoring about the number of 40,000 or 50,000 or 60,000 civilians, as they claim. We don't know these numbers. It's hard to know these numbers while the battle is unfolding. You can only really do accurate estimates of casualties years after a battle, once all the bodies have been found and we know who's missing and whatnot. It's very hard to calculate casualties. You always want to give a high estimate and a low estimate. So some of the estimates for the Gaza conflict are around 40,000. Let's just say 40,000 for the sake of argument. That's over almost a 3-year period. Imagine 40,000 people, the same number of people, dying in a single day. In a single day. So just a little fact like that can just help shift your perspective a little bit and understand the scale of conflict. The scale of conflict in World War II, just how large of a war that was. 80 million people died by the end of it. 80 million casualties, I should say. And we compare that to something like the war in Gaza today. Yes, it's horrible. Children dying, people starving. War is always horrible. It's been horrible since we first started partaking in it. It's horrible 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It's horrible now. It's going to be horrible in the future as well. War is never not going to be horrible. There's never not going to be civilian casualties. There's never not going to be starvation. All these things come with war. But I think it's important for us to present a bit of scale, to get in our minds just how bad can it actually get, just how bad has it been, and just how bad is it right now. And I think just knowing these numbers can help people wrap their minds around that a little bit more. Again, I'm not trying to downplay any of the deaths that are happening in Gaza right now. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. But I want people to kind of see the scope, see just how bad it could get. If Israel wanted to, they could bomb the Gaza Strip like the Germans bombed Stalingrad, and we could see hundreds of thousands of people dead overnight. That could happen, right? That could happen. In World War II, it did happen. In World War II, we did see mass bombings of civilian populations where we saw tens of thousands of civilians wiped out overnight. And I feel like a lot of people are forgetting that. I feel like a lot of people are losing a grip on the scale of death that happened in World War II, just how many people actually died. I feel like the numbers get lost on people, or people neglect to pick up books on World War II now. They're just solely focused on the political issues of the world right now. And to me, that's troubling. To me, you have to know history. It puts everything into perspective. So I have a few more facts that I want to give you guys. As I've said before, I could probably go on all day giving you guys facts about Stalingrad. This is a battle that I've studied exhaustively. But moving on, I want to give you guys a couple interesting facts about the urban warfare. So another fact that I find interesting is that the average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier in the Battle of Stalingrad was 24 hours. That means when a Soviet soldier was thrown into the battle, he was expected to live a day maximum. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, the Germans were better equipped, maybe not with winter clothing, but they were better equipped with better armaments, better rifles, better ammunition. They had more artillery. They had air superiority all throughout Operation Barbarossa. They had air superiority the entire time. You can argue whether or not they had better tanks or not. The T-34 was a pretty formidable tank, so it's hard to debate that. But the Germans, for the most part, were better equipped. They had more organization. They had better generals. This is just a few years after Stalin purged all of his generals, killed nearly all of them. So the Soviets were incredibly unorganized. They didn't even have enough rifles to supply their men. They were basically throwing people in as pairs, 2 soldiers together sharing one rifle. Once the guy who has the rifle goes down, the other guy picks up the rifle. That's basically how they sent them in. They also had the NKVD at the very back of the line shooting anybody that would retreat. They had a no-step back order from Stalin. So you basically couldn't take any steps backwards. If you did, you were shot by your own side. They also had thousands of women serving as medics and as snipers. Now, I will say some of those women, Soviet snipers, were incredibly talented. There's one woman, they called her the Lady of Death. Pavlichenko, I believe was her last name. And she managed to rack up 300, a little over 300, 309, 306, some number like that. She killed of Germans in the war. I don't believe she fought in the Battle of Stalingrad, but she was an incredibly accomplished woman sniper. And there were quite a few like that. There were quite a few women snipers who had pretty high kill counts. So women were fighting in the combat as well. And all of this stuff kind of contributed to the Soviets losing so many men, so many men. The casualties on the Soviet side were extreme during the Battle of Stalingrad, upwards to 1 million troops lost. And it was actually the Soviets who coined the term Rattenkrieg, which means rat war in German. That's basically how they saw the urban combat playing out, is like rat war. You had lines that were changing by the day. So one day the Soviets are here, one day they're back here, one day they're up here, and lines are changing so fast that you're going into houses, turning corners, and you don't know who's going to be around the corner. Is it going to be one of your fellow German soldiers, or is it going to be a Soviet? And friendly fire was very, very common in the Battle of Stalingrad because you're turning corners and you're just shooting whatever moves. It's incredibly terrifying. You have no idea. Nobody watching this video, unless you've been in urban combat, has any idea how terrifying it is to fight in house-to-house combat. It is probably the most terrifying form of combat out there because, again, you don't know who's behind your back. You don't know who's above you. You don't know who's below you. At least in like the Napoleonic Wars, it's like, okay, we're all on this side, they're all on that side, fire the cannons that way, right? It's a little bit cut and clear. Whereas the Battle of Stalingrad, like I said, friendly fire was very, very common. You got to think too, these tanks that they were using were freezing in the winter, and they were freezing at minus 30 degrees Celsius, and they were running out of fuel. The supply lines for the Germans were horrible. They were getting like 10% of the fuel that they actually needed. So the tanks weren't really in use. So they're fighting house to house with grenades, knives, shovels at times. Another horrifying aspect of this war is that because it was so cold, you can't bury anybody. The ground's frozen cold. And you can't use your fuel to burn bodies because you need that fuel to keep yourself warm. And if not to keep yourself warm, to try to keep your tank alive so you can fire off some shots with it. So you're not burning bodies, you're not burying bodies, so what are you using all the bodies for? There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of bodies all around you, some of which are your comrades, people who you grew up with, you went to school with them, you went to high school with them, you signed up for the war, you're fighting in this horrible war, and now they're dead in front of you, and they freeze. They're frozen, so they kind of keep their features a little bit, and you're fighting with them as barriers. These frozen bodies of the comrades that you grew up with are literally being used as frozen barriers, and they're getting blown apart with machine gun fire as you're trying to hide behind them. I could go on and on describing some of the scenes. That's why you should read this book, because you shouldn't just be here listening to me talk about it. Go read this book. He describes it much better than I do. But some of the scenes from Stalingrad are so horrifying. You can't make it up. You can't fictionalize it in your head. That happened and that was real, and only that can be that horrifying, if that makes any sense. Like, this is not something that a Stephen King could come up with. This is horror on another level. This is why I call this shelf my real life horror shelf. I have a shelf over there filled with Stephen King books, and they don't horrify me nearly as much as this shelf does with the real life horror. This is stuff that you can't make up. This is stuff that happened, and we need to know that it happened. We need to read about it. Hence why I'm recommending this book. So there's one more set of facts that I want to present you guys, and then we'll wrap up for today, and I'll let you guys read the rest when you guys read the book. But basically how the German army fell. It was encircled. Like I said, the Sixth Army started out with 300,000 men. By its end, it had about 90,000 men that were encircled. And on January 30th, 1943, Hitler promoted Paulus, General Paulus, to Field Marshal. Now, a German Field Marshal has never surrendered alive in German history. It's never happened. This is the first time that it's ever happened. Paulus, the day after, on January 31st, surrendered alive to the Soviets, and this was seen as a disgrace. The reason why Hitler promoted him in the first place was the expectation that he would take his own life. He didn't do that, and he surrendered alive. Now, out of the 91,000 Germans that were captured, give a random guess of how many survived. 5,000. That's it. 5,000 made it out of Soviet captivity out of the 91,000 that were captured. Now, this highlights a little bit how brutal the Gulag system was. Now, Soviet POWs were not treated good by the Germans either. Absolutely not. But if you read about the Gulag system, I highly recommend reading the Gulag Archipelago or Anne Applebaum's book on the Gulags. You should read about how the Soviets treated the Germans. I can't even talk about it in this video. I'll get my video demonetized for sure. It's so gruesome and graphic what they did to the Germans and how they tortured them. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. Obviously, a lot of them probably deserved it, being a part of the Nazi war machine and invading Russia. But it's just shocking that few made it out alive and how horribly they were treated after being captured. So just kind of shows you the brutality and the grimness of this battle. I'm going to stop there for today because I don't want to recount the whole book to you guys. You guys are supposed to go read this book yourselves. So if I convinced you to do so, definitely come back to this video. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Did you guys have a favorite fact or anecdote from the book that you guys want to share with everybody? What moved you from it? What surprised you from it, or whatever you guys want to share with me? If you guys have already read the book and you guys want to discuss this, down below in the comments. I love discussing World War II history. It's one of my favorite subjects to study, as I'm sure you guys can tell. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, it means the absolute world to me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel in the algorithm, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.